Hello class. In this video we're going to talk about character and string data types, which are referenced in sections 15 and 16 of your week 2 chapter in Zybooks. Yeah, I know these are assigned for week 3 work, but they are listed in the week 2 chapter. So let's take a look and see what we have. So the character type is a simple primitive data type. It can hold a single character. You define it with the car type, and it is assigned with a single quote, as notated here. My car equals single quote M single quote. So the character data type is just that, a single character. And we can use the scanner to get input from the keyboard to read single characters. But the syntax is a little weird and a little different. You can see here we have the scanner.next.char at 0. So we're going to talk about the char at 0 a little later when we get into strings and string methods. But for now, the next piece of the scanner, the next parentheses method, allows us to get the next input token from the scanner, the next word, essentially. And the char at tells us to get the character at position 0. Now, just a quick aside, when we start counting in computers and computer science, we usually start at 0. We don't start at 1. So the first character in your input stream will be character at position 0, not position 1. Something to note is that the .next method returns a string, but the .char at 0 method returns a character. So there is a little bit of behind-the-scenes conversion going on. When we get a little more into methods and objects, this will make a lot more sense. And when we talk about strings in a little bit, I think that'll help clear it up as well. In a minute, we'll take a look at our test lab and do some examples with characters. But for now, I just wanted to show you a few other things about characters. First, we have to look at the ASCII table. And that is a character set that references all the different characters and their associated values. So internally, a character is stored as a number, a small 8-bit number, and you can see the representation of what a character is in its decimal format. So the character capital A has a value of 65, and a character of lowercase a has 97. So this is interesting because not only can we think of them as numbers, but being represented as characters, or vice versa, we can do some of the simple math operations by adding a value to a character to get the next character. And I'll show that in the examples in a little bit. If you want to dig into this ASCII table a little more, there's a link here you could follow, and you could get a little bit more information about it. But this is a pretty standard character set that's used. And as you see, as I scroll, not only do you have the alphabets, you have the numbers, you have symbols, and you have some other characters. And this isn't the full set because we're starting at 32. There are numbers before that and after this. So another thing to think about is these escape sequences. So these are special characters that can be inserted into your print statements to change the format and make it a little more readable. So if you had done a print with a \n, you would be printing a new line character. And then we have a tab, and here's how you would put a single quote, because if you put a single quote in, it's going to think that you're referencing a single character, and the compiler may give you an error. Same with the double quotes. And finally, if you wanted to print a \, well, since the \/ is the indicator that there's a special character coming up, 2 backslashes would print a single \. Yeah, it's a little bit weird, but give it a try. Try some of these in your example labs and see what you get with the output. Lastly, what I want to talk about also is a common error. Different languages represent strings and characters different ways. In Java, a single quote represents a character, whereas double quotes represent strings. So a common mistake could be that you're assigning a double quote to a single character, which is telling Java that the sequence is a string, not a character, even though it really is just a single character. So what will happen is you'll get a compile error when you try to run your program. So just keep that in mind. If you see an error when you're referencing strings or characters, just make sure you've got the right set of quotes, either single or double. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples in our test lab, and we'll see how we can define characters and get them from the scanner and use them. So let's navigate over to our section 35, our test lab, and we'll go in, jump in, and we should have our scanner hopefully predefined as part of the template. I believe I did that. Yep, there it is. So let's just kind of follow along the book a little bit. Let's set up a character. And we can define a blank character as such. And let's define a second character. New car equals X. We'll just give it an X to start with. Oops, see, I put a double quote in. That's wrong. It's got to be a single quote. Now, we'll put a print statement in here because we're going to need it eventually anyway. New car is, and we'll print plus new car. Oops, got the plus, didn't go in. Put that in there, semicolon, return, do a quick test run, make sure everything's working okay. Always good to do test runs periodically when you make your code changes, make sure everything's working as you expect. And it's not, it does not like this, so we'll put, we won't initialize it. We'll just leave it at that. It doesn't like the empty character literal. That's okay. New car is X. Great. So, first thing we want to do is we want to try to input from the scanner. So let's create a scanner. And this is a pretty common syntax. We'll be reading that directly from the keyboard. And we will do the syntax of new car equals CNR, our scanner, our keyboard, dot next, to get the next item, the next token from the scanner, the next word, and the character at position 0. And we'll do a quick test. Actually, let's print a message to the user to let them know that we want them to enter input. Please enter a phrase. And we'll do a semicolon and we'll run it. Please enter a phrase. Great. Let's scroll down a little bit. And I'll type in this is a test. And we'll hit return. And the new character is T. Great. Exactly. So we asked it to get us the first character, position 0, from the word that we just read from the scanner, which is the T. Now, if you wanted to change it up and look at character at the second position, and we rerun, we get the H. Great. Exactly what we thought. The position 1 is really the second position, and that's the H. Okay. So we see that the word this has 4 characters, then we have a space, then 2 more characters, a space, another character, and then another 5 characters. So there's a decent amount. Let's say we want to get position 4. Let's say we make a mistake and we think S is the 4th position with its really position 5, position 3. Remember, we're starting at 0. So this, while the word this does have 4 characters, we count 0 to 3, not 1 to 4. So if I ask for the character of position 4, would you expect it to give me back a space, or an S, or something else? Let's find out. So I'm going to run it, hit return, and I have an error. Pretty big error, it looks like, right? Look at that, a lot of stuff in there. So when you start with your errors, the first thing it tells you is what the exception is. And index 4 out of bounds for length 4. You'll see index out of bounds errors a lot when we deal with strings, eventually when we get to talk to arrays. This is an indicator that you're trying to read something past the end of whatever it is you read, whether it's past the end of a string or past the end of an array. So you'll see that it says length 4, index 4 for length 4. So if the length of the item is 4, the word this, the index has to go from 0 to 3. So 4 is out of bounds, even though there are 4 characters in the list. Yeah, I'm sorry, in this string. So, whoops, if we come back here and we change it to 3, and we run it again, and we'll put in this as a test, and we hit return, this time we get the S. So just remember the syntax if you want to read a single character. Remember we start counting from 0. If you do forget to include this charat or carat and run it, you'll get a different kind of error. Incompatible types. String cannot be converted to character, and this is, remember, this is an indicator that this is a character type. The .next method from a scanner gives us back a string. So this would be an indicator that you need to include your charat again. Oops, charat 0. And let's just run it to make sure we're still good. I want to demonstrate one more thing before we move on to strings. Good. And the last thing I want to demonstrate, if we assign it the double quotes. We make a mistake, we think we're typing in a character, we use the double quotes to indicate a string. If we run it, again, we're going to get the incompatible data types error. Here we are. And you'll just note that you have to go back and change it to single quotes. Now you'll also note in the error message itself, it tells you what line number the error is on, line 10. Sometimes that error, the line might be the line above it. Sometimes the error might be on the line below it. So just use that as a starting point for looking for your error. Okay, good. So save this as a reference. Hopefully you can use this to help you with your labs and your activities for characters. So now let's take a look at some strings. So a string essentially is a list of characters or a group of characters, a sequence of characters. It's not a primitive data type, so it is not like an integer. It is not like a character. It is not like a Boolean, which we'll see in a little while. It is an object, and this is our first look at an object. We're not going to go into the details right now of what it is, but just know that an object has values, which is the text of the string itself, and methods, or proper attributes, things you can do to the object. And we'll see that, such as the .next method that we talked about just a few minutes ago. So when a string is created, and you're using double quotes now, the string is stored in memory as a sequential list of characters. When you define a string, it creates a new object and it stores that data. When we get into our methods, objects, and classes discussion in a few weeks, this will make a lot more sense. Just for now, know that it stores it in memory as a sequential list in memory locations. Now, we can define a string with a string data type, and we'll be using that. It looks very similar to all the other data types we've used so far, either whether it's a character or an integer or the scanner. Well, maybe a little different than the scanner. But you can see here, just in this little example here, this is your data type. See, it has a capital letter. Capital letter indicates it's an object. And we're assigning it a value. And it could be multiple, it could be fairly large. It could be a lot, you could hold a lot of text into a single string. Okay, so, again, we're going to use the scanner. We're going to use the scanner to get input. And there are two main methods that you can use to get string values into your program. The first is the .next method. Now the .next method will read the next sequence of strings, sequence of characters from your input directly into a variable, and it reads up to the next white space character. So the white space character is either a space or a carriage return or a tab or something along those lines. So it will read the next until we get to the next white space, but it will not read that white space. So I'm gonna jump over to our lab just so we can take a look at what that looks like. So I'm gonna jump back into section 35. And we should still have our character stuff in here. While that reloads. Okay, so we'll just comment out our character stuff for now. And we will define a string. String, new string equals, double quotes. Oops, get that colon out of there. Quick run, make sure our syntax is proper. It is no output because we didn't print anything. So let's read a string value. Scanner dot next. And we will do our typical print. The string we read was, and then we will print new string. Let's give it a run, and we'll stick with our this is a test. Oops, I know why I didn't prompt it to enter something. So, well, it's waiting for input. So you can. This is how it can be confusing if you don't prompt the user to enter input. So, this is a test. The string we read was this, and you could see here it is. This. All right, I'm going to put our prompt back in. Let's say we wanted to read the next word. Well, we can simply just copy and paste these two lines and do it again. And I'll get rid of some of these spaces to make it a little easier to read. This is a test. And there, now we read the second word. But you could see we did not read the white space. It jumped over the space between this and is. So when we use the next method, we read just the next sequence of characters up to the next white space. Okay, jumping back to our chapter, and we'll scroll down to the next line area, and that'll be the next thing we take a look at. Where's next line? There it is, okay. So next line kind of does what it says. It reads the next line of input, including any white space, up to the end of the line, up to the new line character. So that's what next line does. It reads a line of text, right? That's essentially what it's doing. So next reads a word, next line reads a line. So we can use that, again, in our example, and we'll try it out. Let's go back to our section 35. Wait for it to load. I should just open a second tab so we don't have to keep doing this. I'll do that in the next video. So new string equals scanner dot next line. And I'll copy and paste my print statement. And we'll give it a run. And we see our prompt in a second. This is a test. Now, before we run it, let's think about what we're expecting to see and make sure our output is what we think is going to happen. So we're coming in and we're reading the first word with the next, which is this. We come read the next word, which is, and then we read the next line, which is the rest of this line, a test. So I would expect to see 3 prints of this, is, and then a test. So let's see if that works, and it does. Now you see here, interesting, is that, remember I said next does not read the white space. Next line does. So when we read this, it did not read the space. When we did the second read next, it skipped this white space and read is. But then we did next line, and it read from the end of is, the S, to the end of the line, which included that space between is and a. So you can see that the next line will read anything that's on that line, including white space. Okay, jumping back over to our book, jumping into strings. Let's see what else we want to cover in this chapter. Where we have the next, we talked about the next, we talk about the next line. Good. Getting multi-word names. This is a little example that shows you how you can do a multi-prompt sequence where you can ask for a first name, read the line, ask for a last name, read the next line. So one thing to point out, and definitely take a look at this activity, 2.16.7. Next and next line, when you use them together, you need to be a little bit careful. Because as I said in the lab discussion just a minute ago, next reads up to the next white space but does not read it. Next line does not skip white space, so it'll read from wherever next left off. So you may get some unexpected results if you're not expecting it. And you can see from this example how the next line is reading the white space where next is not. Okay, so that's it for strings and characters. Try out some of the different combinations, try out some of the different examples, and give that a go. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to show. I almost forgot. Let's jump back to our lab. I wanted to show something with characters. So let's jump back into characters real quick. As soon as this lab loads, I really am going to open another tab in the second video. So let's comment out, and this time we're going to use the multi-line comment. The star, the /*, followed by the //. So I just commented out all our string stuff, and we're back to characters. Actually, I want to keep that, and I want to put the string stuff down here. Yeah. And we'll take this and we'll put this back into play. Actually, we don't even need the scanner. We'll take that back out again. And we don't need a phrase. So what we're going to do is we're going to tinker around with new character. You see we have the default value of x, the initial value. We set it to x. So this is going to look weird, but what if we did new car equals new car plus 1? Why are we adding a number to a letter? That's kind of weird. But remember, when I said that numbers are stored internally, they're stored as numbers. So you can't necessarily add a number to it. You'll see you'll get this conversion error. But you can do some casting if you really wanted to. However, there is an exception here. So remember our plus plus and our minus minus, our pre and post increment instructions that we saw? You can use them here. So remember what plus plus does? Plus plus before the variable increases the variable value by 1 and then stores that value back into its variable. So in this particular case, we're increasing the x value to the next one in the list, which would be y. So if I run this, I'm expecting to see the output of y. And there you go, it does work. And if we did minus minus, we get w. So while you can't directly add a value to a character, it's a type mismatch, you can use the pre and post increments to go to a next character in a sequence. And there may be some use cases for that when you're processing strings and looking for specific characters and such. So just know it's available. It's not widely used, but it is available for you should you need to use it. Okay, let's just go back one last time, take a look at chapter 16, make sure I didn't miss anything. I think that was the last thing I wanted to cover, and we are just about coming up on that 25-30 minute mark. So let's wrap it up for strings. Going back to the chapter, next video we're going to take a look at some math and random number implementations, and then we'll get into another video about the Boolean variable, and that's going to come into play quite a bit in the next several weeks. Okay, that's it for now. Hope you got a lot out of this, and I will see you in the next one.